Okay, well, hello everyone. I guess we'll get started here. So welcome to the fourth webinar in a series of 8 for the Forestry Adaptation Community of Practice. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Annette Moran, and I am the facilitator of the online adaptation communities of practice. And those are run by us here at OPR, which is the Ontario Centre for Climate Impacts and Adaptation Resources. And we're located at Laurentian University in Sudbury, Ontario. So the way the webinar will run is as follows. So after this short introduction, we'll have the main presentation, which will go for about 35 to 40 minutes. And then at the end of the webinar, we'll have some time left over for any questions that you might have for the presenter. So if you do have any questions during the webinar, we just ask that you please hold them until the end. And before we get going, I just have a few housekeeping items to go over. So first, for those of you who dialed into the conference call line, your lines have been automatically muted. And the reason for this is just to avoid any audio distractions, feedback, etc. during the webinar. So to ask a question during the Q&A, all you'll have to do is dial *6 and that will unmute your line. But please do keep them muted during the presentation. Also, you'll notice that there's a chat box on the left-hand side of your screen. So you can use this chat box to field any questions that you might have for the presenter during the Q&A session. And as well, if you have any technical difficulties during the webinar, you can use this chat area to type your message, or you can click on my name and you can send me a private message, and then I can try to help you as best as I can. I also want to mention that we are recording the webinar today, and I'll be sending out a copy of the recording to all those who have pre-registered with me, and we'll also be posting it to the Community of Practice website. Finally, I know we have some people on the line today who may not be familiar with what the Forestry Adaptation Community of Practice, or the FACoP, is. So I wanted to take this opportunity and just quickly mention that it's an interactive online community, and it's dedicated to those who are either working in forestry or are just interested in forestry and climate change adaptation in Canada. It includes features such as news articles, events, an online library, discussion forums, and much, much more. So it's free to join. So if there's anyone on the line today who's interested in learning more about the FACoP, please just click on the link in the chat box for more information and to register. So with that being said, we are very excited to have Dr. Sylvie Gauthier on the line with us today to talk about tracking climate change effects in the Canadian forest. And just so you know a little bit more about your presenter, Sylvie received her PhD in forest ecology and genetics from the University of Montreal in 1992 and joined the fire ecology and behavior team of the Canadian Forest Service at the Petawawa National Forestry Institute as a fire ecologist the following year. 3 years later, she moved on to Natural Resource Canada's Laurentian Forestry Centre, where she works now as a research scientist. Sylvie's research interests focus on the characterization of past, current, and future disturbance regimes and the factors affecting them, the effect of disturbance regimes on forest dynamics, and the translation of this knowledge into sustainable forest management strategies. So recently, she has also started looking at forest management adaptation strategies to face the impact of climate change. And on top of her work with NRCan, she's also an adjunct professor at 3 universities where she supervises the work of graduate students. And she's also published more than 90 papers and has overseen the writing of a book on ecosystem management of the boreal forest. So on behalf of everyone joining us, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to you, Sylvie, for taking the time to present this webinar for us today. It is very much appreciated. So without further ado, I will now turn things over to you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to be here to talk about two deliverables that we have in the context of a project that we have at CFS on forest change. And the forest change program was built under the adaptation team of the Government of Canada Clear Air Agenda. And we received money in 2011 to start that particular initiative in order to support adaptation in the face of climate change of the Canadian forest sector. The objective of the initiative is to maximize the opportunities and to minimize the risks that are associated with climate change on our forest and forest sector. Within the forest change initiative, we have 3 main deliverables. The tracking system, which is the one that I will be talking about today, but we also have the adaptation toolkit, which aims to provide actionable scientific information for the forest sector, such as maps, decision support systems, synthesis of information, and adaptation options. And we also have another deliverable, which is on the what we call the integrated assessment, which is looking at the implication of the changes on Canadian forests and the forest sector under a range of climate scenarios. So with regards to the tracking system, we recognize that it is very important to explore and implement adaptation options in the face of the change that are coming, together with mitigation strategy. And to be able to do that effectively, we need to implement that in an adaptive management framework where we monitor what is going on, we assess what are the changes, and we adjust our action in the face of those changes. And within that context, a tracking system that reports on the effect of climate change on the forest and the forest sector is an integral part of that adaptation cycle. A tracking system or tracking the indicators can provide information that will improve the knowledge. So looking at change or trends in different aspects of the forest ecosystem and the forest sector can also help us to see what is the efficiency of the action that we pause to adapt climate change. And it's also a way to raise awareness and preparedness of the organization towards adaptation. So all of these three main pillars of the adaptation, which are knowledge, action, and will, are all informed by indicators of climate change. So we have currently two main products that were built for the tracking system. The first one is an information report, and the second one is a tracking system that is a web-based place where indicators are reported. And I'll talk about those two main deliverables. So the first one is the information report, which was released earlier this year. You have the web address for the French and English version of the report, and I will spend the next 2 minutes describing a little bit what you can find in it. So the overarching goal of the report was to provide a series of potential indicators as well as selection criteria to develop a tracking system for different organizations, but that relate Canada's forest and forest sector. And specifically, we present a suite of potential indicators of climate change with a series of comments and explanations for why these are important. And we also provide some criteria to help in the selection and prioritization of these indicators to track the effect of climate change. The group who produced that report was composed of CFS scientists from each of our 5 regional centers, plus people from Ottawa. And the information was based on a number of workshops where all the scientists and the forest community of research within CFS was asked to provide thoughts about what should be followed in order to track the effect of climate on the forest, of climate change, I mean. So, as I said, we collected and interpret the information from a series of workshops, and we also synthesized the literature from web and DRE or peer-reviewed literature to look at what was done in terms of indicator elsewhere in the world. So the report proceed with a three-step approach, or suggests that the selection of indicators should be based on a three-step approach. So first, looking at a series of candidate indicators, then look at them through a series of criteria to finally select them to incorporate in any particular tracking system, which has a particular objective, and I'll come back to that in a moment. So the first step, we identify about 160 potential indicators that were grouped in different systems. So we have the one that belongs to the climate system itself, the one that belongs to the forest, which are decomposed in landform, natural disturbance, species phenology, species distribution and abundance, forest stem dynamics, and soil, as well as those that belongs to the human or societal dimension. So this was the first step. In a second step, we proposed a number of criteria to help in the prioritization of these potential indicators. So the sensitivity, which is required, which means that there's a strong signal-to-noise ratio. The indicator should be measurable already, and in the document you will see that there are some indicators that are not currently, for which it's not easy to measure right now, but the technology is changing fastly, and those might be become measurable and feasible in the near future. So they will appear in the document, but they will be ranked lower in terms of their capacity to be currently measured. There's also the spatio-temporal scope. For instance, for the Canadian Forest Service tracking system, we want to have the indicator be measurable for the entire country, because this is our mandate. But a province or another organization could look at the spatio closer to its own regions and so on. And the relevance is also the fact that the indicator can inform for the particular objective of any particular tracking system. After that, some indicators can be selected to become part of a particular tracking system. And as you measure and as the information is coming up, some indicator may be seen as having a need to be refined, or new ones can be developed as depending on the type of outcome that comes from the measurements of these indicators. So the structure of the information report for each of the three systems, you have the rationale for the indicator, the indicators that are proposed. There's also linkages among indicators, and we have also for the biophysical indicators conducted a preliminary assessment on the sensitivity and the feasibility of the current indicator, and this has served as a base for the selection of indicators for the track system of CFS that I will present a little bit later. So an example here of one indicator and how it's presented. So for this particular one, it's the length of what is illustrated on the map is the change in the length of the fire system. And on the example on the table, it's for the FWI. And you see that, for instance, the Canadian Forest Fire Weather Index is ranked as having a high sensitivity to climate change and high feasibility. So this type of information was selected and will be part of the CFS tracking. The information report also identifies opportunity and challenge for implementing the tracking system. One of the challenges we have if we want to look, for instance, at the post-disturbance regeneration across the country is that we don't have standards right now to measure that type of regeneration across the country. So it's difficult to pull the information all together and to get the information in a similar format, which may preclude us to make all the good analysis that we could if we had standards. There's also a need, or we identify a need for collaboration and coordination among stakeholders, and it goes in the sense what I just talked about. And it also shows that even though there might be a short-term cost in establishing some of the indicators, the cost of not following them may be a lot higher because the outcome might come as a surprise rather than something that we could have adapted to. Okay, and this information report was an important step towards the implementation of the tracking system that we are just establishing right now within the Forest Change project. So let's go now to the tracking system. The beta version is now available for the tracking system, and I have the address at the end of the presentation, so you can have it. Here I will just show you the frame and some slides. Our bandwidth is not always working well, so I prefer to have slides to show you the interface than to make a real demonstration, because I was not sure that it would be efficient. So, but you will be able to access it at the end of this talk if you want. So that's the first page when you get to the Forest Change Initiative, and you see that you can go to the tracking system or to the adaptation toolkit. And within the next page, everything that relates to climate will be in blue, the forest in green, and the human system will be represented in orange. Then, so what we want to do with the tracking system is make the indicators that we have selected available to the community, and we want it to be dynamic, so that the information is updated in a timely fashion, with the objective of increasing awareness on ongoing climate change effects on the forest and the forest sector, and to help in decision making forest sector. So the property we were looking at was to make the site as a one-stop portal for the data and analytical results on climate change impact on the forest and forest sector from CFS. An open site that would be open to the general public for browsing and also for data download, and it needs to be flexible to accommodate updates, new indicators, and also change in resource allocation and so on. So basically the idea, as we talked about earlier, is to have indicators on that relates to the climate system, to the forest system, and to the social system. And here you see a few examples of climate, forest, and society indicators that will be tracked on this. So the site, as I mentioned, is under construction. So when you click to the tracking system on the first page, you would get to that page and you will see the list of indicators that are available right now, and they are presented with a question that relates to the forest. Each indicator has a first element which describes why the indicator is important, some text and graphs or maps that show what has changed in the past. Then a section on what is the outlook for the future, so the projections are there. And then there's a section for data download and technical information from reference. So I selected randomly an indicator, but it happened to fall out on fire area burn. Remember that I'm a fire ecologist. So here it looks like the first page will be looking like this. You first have the main key points that summarize what is observed in the next page. But if you want to go further, you would click on why is this indicator important, and you would get that next slide, which provides you a little bit more information and as well as references and link to box that describe the results themselves. You also have access for to some databases if such databases exist for that indicator. Then you go to the next series and you see what has changed in the past. So here for the fire area burn. Yeah. For the area burn and the number of fire, you see that across the country, we can see that there is a trend for an increase in area or number of fires since 1959. And then there's what are the outlooks. In the case of these maps, it shows the outlook for the area burn in regions, and there's some explanation of what is out there. Finally, there's the technical information that is available and the download that people could access, get the data to do their own analysis. As I mentioned, as the site is under construction, there's also currently a section with a few questions and a place for feedback that you can send to our group. We are interested to see how the site is seen from the people outside the CFS. So I invite you to give us your comments once you get there. So the indicators that we currently have and the ones that are in green are ready. I think they are all on the website currently. Are first of all the several drought indices, the start of the fire season. Both of these belong to the climate system, and then there's a series for the biophysical system. Forgot to move the key, but the species distribution of major tree, burn area, and fire number, which I've just showed you, indicators on tree mortality. And on the human side, we have information on wildfire evacuation and the cost of fire protection. So in the future, we will have information on pest species distribution, mostly the most important insect species, and sorry, some pathogens. The percent of young forests will be monitored and looked at also. The freeze-thaw cycle as an indicator of potential access to the forest. The wildland-urban interface, and then coming, but a little bit later, the timing of bud burst, change in radial growth. The work on black spruce is completed, and some other species will be coming around soon. And we will have 1 or 2 biodiversity indicators. So the beta version is available at that location, and it's protected with a username and a password. Depending on the system you have, you may have to repeat the password and the username 2 times to access the website. We don't know exactly why, but just one note in finishing, the French version is available also, but it is not as up to date as the English version right now, but will be updated soon also. So that covers what I wanted to show you today. So I'm open to questions, and I have, I want to thank the organizer for giving me the opportunity to present what we've conducted so far on the tracking system within CFS.
Okay, well, you're welcome, and thank you, Sylvie, for the great presentation. So we have a lot of time left for any questions. So just as a reminder, you can ask questions via the chat box if you'd like to do that, and then we can just read them out loud for everybody. And you can also ask questions over the telephone if you're on the conference call line with us by unmuting your phone, and that's by hitting *6. So I guess to start us off, Guillermo Castilla has a question on the chat box here. So what is the definition of young forest under that indicator?
Yeah, it's still a work in progress, but I would say that it's probably forests that are below 30 years, so still in the regeneration phase where the tree has not yet reached, let's say, 5 to 7 meters, so that the close forest characteristics are not reached yet. And this particular indicator was chosen as it can be an indication of regeneration problems that may occur in some regions following any type of disturbances, but together with drought, for instance.
Okay, thank you very much. So Dominic has a question here. So is there good information about the duration of winter harvesting and transport season?
Well, this is one that we've looked about, and where maybe collaboration and networking could be of use, because the company knows when they have access, when they stop accessing the forest for those reasons. To my knowledge, we don't necessarily have standardized reporting of that type of information.
Okay, thank you. So Cindy Pierce has a question as well. So in the future, is there an intention to monitor how closely projections for some indicators, for example, area burned, match what actually happens?
Yes.
Okay.
The short answer is yes. I guess the idea why the projections are put together with the indicator is exactly for that, to look at how, or to help refining the projection based on what the observations are.
Great, thank you. Let's see here. So Don Robinson from ESSA has a question. So what insects and pathogens do you think will become available first? And how do you deal with gaps, either spatial and temporal?
Yeah, for the insects, I think what we were thinking about was the most important species, like mountain pine beetle, spruce budworm, um, forest ant caterpillar. I think those are the maybe gypsy moth. With regards to the pathogens, there's the data that FIDS had collected is available through one site of Dan McKinney's group. And although we recognize that absence of a pathogen species is not a true absence, it may just be that there's a gap, a spatial and temporal gap. That's the best information available right now. This can serve at least as an indication of where the species was, and linking that with climatic envelope, you can have some sense for where the climate suitability may become better for that, but that's an area for where research is still needed, particularly for the pathogens.
Okay, thank you. All right, so Frédéric Doyon has a question. So how fine are the resolutions for those indicators? And can they be downscaled for addressing regional or local issues? For example, what about the tree mortality?
You know what? I'm the representative of a big team here, so I mean, if all my colleagues were around, maybe the answer would be slightly different. But for some of the indicators, we are trying to make the information available at the finest resolution we can, so that people from a particular region could get the information and do their own analysis. So depending on the indicator, with regards to the tree mortality, to be honest, I don't recall exactly what the indicator is. Basically, for the mortality indicator, it is about trembling aspen mortality, and it's the CIFA site of Ted Hogg. So the mortality will be, the indicator of mortality will be very specific in that particular case.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have some more questions here. So William Richards writes, for the climate indicators, for example, temperature and precipitation, are you using homogenized data, so HCCD, which has been corrected for non-climate factors?
That's really a question that I cannot answer. The information that we use was produced by David Price and Dan McKinney. I can maybe if you write me an email afterwards, I can provide or direct you to the appropriate person to answer that question. But unfortunately, unless David Price is online.
Okay, that's great. So we also have your email address at the end of this presentation, which everybody should have got an email this morning. So that's great. So he can send you an email. So Kelvin writes, this is a very interesting framework or platform, and I'm wondering if and or how other organizations might be able to contribute their data or even their own indicators.
That's a good question, Kelvin. I think that for the fire information, for instance, many of the baseline data are coming from organizations, the provincial firefighting organization or responsible for collecting the information that we pull together to make a countrywide information available. So I don't see why it would not be possible. I think it allows for a more robust analysis of trends when we have data from different provinces, for instance, or agency, and it's worth thinking about. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I see some more people writing here, but I just want to take a quick break and see if there's anybody on the conference call line that has a question. If so, just hit *6 and that will unmute your line. Okay, so no questions on the conference call line, and I don't see anybody writing anymore, so we'll just do, I guess, a last call for questions since they've kind of slowed. I don't want to rush anybody, so give a couple seconds here. Okay, great. Well, I guess if there are no more questions, we'll wrap things up. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today for the FACoP webinar. We hope you enjoyed it. A very, very big thank you goes out to you, Sylvie, for your time and effort for a great informative presentation. Any last comments from you before we sign off here?
I guess I can just go to the slide with my address.
Absolutely.
So if people want to send me an email, I can probably direct them to the appropriate researcher for the information with regards to any indicators.
Okay.
In the presentation, you have the address of the Beta website. Please visit it and comment it. Remember that it's under construction right now, and we want to improve it. Also the link to the information report are also presented earlier in the presentation. So don't hesitate to get it, and I think it's available also on your site, Annette. I'm right?
Okay, the FACoP, I believe it is, but I will double check and make sure that that's on there as well. So, okay, perfect. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you everybody for joining, and have a great week and happy